Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we're looking at the RDF Gladiator Mark II. Otherwise known in Battletech, this is the Archer, a nice 70-ton walking machine of death. So, uh, looking at it in a Battletech forum versus the Robotech, we're talking about a slight size difference. Um, like we are with pretty much all the other ones. Um, Battletech has got this listed as a 70-ton mech, and Robotech has really got this as a 27.4-ton mech. So, the difference between the two series. Um, and of course, the interesting thing is when we look at the two of them and looking ahead at one of the videos that will be kind of coming up here. I haven't done it yet, but just kind of taking a sneak peek. Um, Sometimes we had weapon systems on the Robotech side of the battle mechs that never appeared on the uh, Battletech side. So, um, it's just how things had kind of worked out. Uh, but on the other hand, on Robotech, things are a little bit more kind of done up really for the cartoon and what was portrayed in the cartoon, where BattleTech was built up as a game um, to really run hand in hand with a lot of the old tactical battle kind of games or whatever, where people, similar to like what Warhammer does, and a lot of the games that preceded all of these, where they would do Napoleonic battles and all that. So, that's kind of where things kind of differ and how they differed because of how things were built and everything else. So, all right, let's get into our write up on this, and then we'll look at what we actually have listed here, and then we will get into what we have for Battletech. All right, so Robotech, another non transformable Battloid mecha. This Battloid, or this Destroid, is used as a defensive weapons system in deep space aboard the SDF 1 and by the Earth Defense Forces. Unlike its fellow destroids like the Excalibur, which are basically heavy artillery support units, the Gladiator is a frontline combat unit designed with an excellent balance of mobility, weaponry, and Walker scale hand to hand combat capabilities. Of all the destroids, the Gladiator is the most versatile in overall means of mobility, agility, and means of attack. It is the only destroid that is capable of full hand-to-hand combat, so powerful are its slashing hands that they have been known to punch through the armor of Zentradi battle pods. Its combat capabilities are augmented with an impressive combination of weapon systems. The main disadvantage to the Gladiator is that it lacks any sort of real long-range weapon system, another drawback shared by most of the ground-based mecha. It is, or is that it is a slower than most of the enemy mecha and requires, or that is required to face. Since the Zentradi assault on Earth, the Gladiator has become a major tool in the peacekeeping efforts during the difficult reconstruction of cities and society. It is the ideal unit in law enforcement, riot control, civil defense, recon, and patrols in remote areas. Macross. Proof that a second place can strike gold. The MBR-07 Mark II Spartan may have lost out for first in the Destroid design competition, but the mecha was too good for the UN to pass it up. The MBR-7 followed roughly a year and a half after its first Destroids began design, entered trial production in 2005, and by 2008, field units were beginning to first roll out. A simple but incredibly efficient mecha, the Spartan combines numerous weapons and compact chassis to create a very potent close combat war machine. The Spartan's center mounted Multi-gun weapon array is complemented by two 12-pack missile launchers on either side of the torso and rounded out with a dual anti-aircraft laser cannon mounted just behind the cockpit hatch. In addition to these ballistic and beam weapons, the Spartan's two hands are powerful grappling claws capable of tearing through the armor of the enemy mecha and overpowering any full-size Zentradi soldier. The Spartan uses a standardized control cockpit, allowing most other UN forces mecha to easily master control of these battle robots. Valkyrie pilot Hariku, uh, the Japanese name for Rick Hunter, I'm sorry, operating the Spartan in battle against Zentradi malcontents at the Highlander City airport in the late 2011, utilized the superior hand-to-hand combat ability of the Spartan and a familiar control cockpit. The Hunter and his combat team were able to easily subdue both mechanized Zentradi and infantry units attacking the airport. During the battle, Captain uh, Hunter utilized a mecha-sized combat baton to down a reguled and incapacitate unarmed Zentradi soldiers. Throughout Space War One, the following war, the Spartan continued to be a thorn in the backside of the UN Spacey's enemies. Star Wars. While most ground walkers are walking artillery pieces, able to do much damage in the battlefields they strode upon, none really have access to up close hand to hand combat abilities. This is where the Gladiator came in. There are many mecha walkers, especially with the RDF destroids, that could use an up close combat able walker to watch their backs while they lay waste to the enemy. Also, uh, how often have adventurers and would be heroes run into a rogue rancor? Uh, or worse, a tribe of them. The gladiator could battle these beasts head to head, toe to toe, and perhaps even survive to tell the tale. Perhaps gladiators are even used to corral rancors and or other giant creatures somewhere in the galaxy. For whatever reason they are used, the gladiator would be ideal to have the rest of the destroids to guard them and other fortifications and locales, as well as take advantage of any opportunity it ever gets to close the distance by the enemy, say a rare AT-AT, and get too close and receives a blow from the gladiator's battle mace. Okay, so getting into the main differences, what we see here from the gladiator is it's very capable hand-to-hand combat. Looking at its size, it is 37 feet tall, 11.7 meters, and comes in, as I said before, 27.4 metric tons. So this has a crew of one or two. Again, like I've said before, most of the time we're going to see a crew of one. Typically, if it's a crew of two, you're going to have the second one as a kind of battlefield commander or, in a Battletech sense, a lance commander. All right. Cargo capacity is 40 kilograms, which is pretty standard for a lot of our vehicles. And I've used that same reference in a lot of the vehicles I've created in like the GI Joe in the D6 format. Um, it's got a full coverage for our pilot. No, we have this going about 65 miles an hour or 104 kilometers an hour in our Robotech format. Has a body strength of 60, which is pretty respectable. This has a TZ4 gun cluster which has a laser, a 32 millimeter autocannon, a 108 millimeter grenade launcher, a flamethrower, and it's possible to fire link this all together. We do have a fire control of 2D when we're using this weapon cluster. Um, trying to see exactly. Now, this is in the chest, under the shoulders. Um, Looking at the cockpit, I want to say it's kind of on the ball turret here, as well as just underneath. We have our kind of robotic eye sensor here. And we do have the cannons that are sitting up on top, which are going to be referenced here a little later. All right, so this gives us um, damage 2D for the laser, 2D for a short burst, 4D for a long burst, and 6D for a full burst of the 32 millimeter autocannon. We have a 4D for the 180 millimeter grenade launcher, and 6D for speeder scale on the flamethrower, which is fire linked. So this gives us our flamethrower, which we will end up using that as our, or pretty close to that for our flamethrower when we get to that in our weapon system, which I'm kind of starting to work on. And we will see this most likely on Saturday. So if you're watching this, this should be going up on, I believe, Wednesday. So Saturday, I will get a weapons kind of list for bringing, say, Battletech into the D6 system. And I think it will probably be a D6 for our flamethrower, because I was looking that up and I had a number fairly similar to that, but we will get to that later. Now, when it comes to our weapons, ammo, of course, our laser is going to be unlimited. They're using a protoculture. Um, we have 240 rounds for our 32 millimeter autocannon, 50 rounds for our 180 millimeter grenade launcher, and 50 blasts out of our flamethrower. Our rate of fire, we have one beam per attack from our laser. Our autocannon can shoot per 6 shots per burst, 12 shots for a long burst, and 24 for our full round burst. Our grenade launcher is only going to be 1 round per attack, and our flamethrower, we can have 2 charges per attack. Um, our missile pods. Now, these are short range missiles in our shoulders. We have a fire control of 3D. Now, depending on how we want to fire this, we can do, we have 24 rounds, um, or 24 missiles being fired out if we're shooting both pods. Now, we have anything from explosives, tear gas, knockout gas, fire retardant, uh, depending on the typical loadout that you want or need this to be. We also have plasma napalm, smoke rounds, knockout gas. Um, you could mix or match them depending on what you really need this to be. And I'm just going to throw it out in that regard because, in the sense of, if you're trying to do this as a um, police kind of mecha, you may want half of it being a knockout gas, maybe another 4 rounds of um, fire retardant, and maybe a few explosive, very light on the explosive, so that way you can fight like a Zentradi, or if this isn't the Star Wars sense, maybe whatever incoming kind of enemy mecha, aircraft, what have you. Um, but you're going to rely more on something that will deter people from rioting, and so on and so forth. All right, we have twin barrel ROV 10 lasers. Um, let's see, these are on the turret on top of the head. So in the Macross version, this is these are laser cannons. Let's see. And there's light laser cannons as far as that goes as well. We have a fire control of 1D, and we do have a damage of 3D. This has a rate of fire of 1 twin fire linked cannons. Now, optional weapons. We could give them the gun pod, very much like what we have from the Veritechs, seeing that they do have the hands. Now, fire control. Uh, this is taken straight from the Veritex. Seeing that this is a Battloid, it's going to have a fire control of 1D, and it can do either the standard 3D short burst, 6D long burst, or a 9D full round burst. And it's going to have its magazine, 200 rounds in a magazine here. And if we're doing a short burst, it's going to go through 10 rounds. A long burst is going to go through 20 rounds and 40 rounds for a full round burst. Uh, Doing our hand-to-hand combat, we can do a restrained punch or a slap at 40 damage, a full strength punch at 70 damage, a power punch at 70 plus 2 damage. We have our stomp, which is effective for things that are 12 feet tall or smaller. And that's doing a 40 damage, a body block or tackle at 5D, a tear or pry with the hands at 4D damage, battle mace at 5D for a restrained attack. A full attack is going to be 8D. Battle mace power attack is 8D plus 2. Let's see. The equipment that we have on board. So we have the main engine. Um, we have searchlights. We have a radar, which goes out to about 30 miles. We have the video or audio or radio video communications on board, laser targeting system, the combat computer, which can calculate and store and monitors data on the control panel, computer, and heads up display, um, external audio pickup, loudspeaker, thermal imager, night vision optics, reinforced pilot's compartment, heat radiation shield, independent oxygen and circulatory system, has a fuel capacity with the protoculture on board, has a gives all destroids and Veritech fighters a long lifespan, can operate at full capacity for an average of 22 years, half that if it was in constant use. We have 180-degree rotation for your torso twist, um, and that's what we have here. Now, getting into this in our Battletech sense, it's interesting because we are looking at this as a short range, hand to hand combat type of mecha. When we look at this in our Battletech sense, this is a much larger vehicle, has a cruising speed of 44.1 kilometers per hour. Maximum speed is 65 kilometers an hour. So it is significantly slower, but this is also easily twice as heavy because we're looking at 70 tons compared to being 27 tons in Robotech. This has an armament of four diverse optics type 18 medium lasers and two Doombug long range missiles, uh, 20 racks. So, in the Battletech sense, this is a long range support uh, battle mech with the long range missile launchers in here. And the armor is a little bit lighter. Now this has a body strength of 60, which we have 13 metric tons of armor. I'd keep the 60 the body strength. I think that's pretty respectable. I think it's worth having that. Um, but when we look at the difference here, uh, we don't look at this as as being the in close hand to hand fighting. These are things that we don't typically do in most of the combat scenarios in Battletech. Not saying that it doesn't happen, but it's not something that we typically do. We'd like to be able to pick people off at longer range, and that's usually how we go about doing it, or at least how my group had always done it in our combat sessions. Um, so having the big 20 rack long range missiles on either side, and then we do have four medium lasers, two on each side here of the torso. Um, well, one's in the left. Well, one's in the left arm, one's in the right arm, so they're actually arm mounted, so they're tucked away in the arm, and then we have two in the center torso. So right off this ball turret, there's one on either side, and then we have our targeting array here, and that's really the big encompassing view on this. So the LRM-20s, as I'm kind of fielding this out for BattleTech. So the list I have is a more modern list, and take this for what it is, because we have short range, medium range, the MRMs, and the LRMs, the long range missiles. So where I'm starting to go with this is we're going to be looking at, depending on how the racks come out to being. Okay, um, a short range missile would start off with a base of 4D. Now, depending on how many missiles you're going to be launching, because you could launch it either as a single or as a group. So if you launch a single missile at a target, it would be a 4D for a short range missile. And then if you have like a three pack, which we don't really have in Battletech, I realize that typically your SRMs are 2, 4, and 6. But some of the, when we look at a locust, for instance, and I'm throwing this out here, sometimes you see what looks like a three pack on there. That's why I'm doing it up this way. Um, you're going to have 4D for the base damage, and if it was like a three pack and you're launching all three of them, that 4D now becomes a 6D because each additional missile will add an extra D worth of damage, and that makes it nice and simple. So depending on how it's drawn, how you want it to work out, um, just trying to go off the pictures here and bring it into our D6 universe. I think that would really encompass this. Now, our medium range missiles would be a 3D as our base, and then you go from there. Now, the scary things for the MRMs, and I don't have the page in front of me, I do believe they have MRM 40s. So that is a very scary thought that you have starting at 3, going out to 40. So that is now what, 42 dice worth of possible hurt being put onto someone. Even at Walker scale, I think capital scale ships would be very nervous with that. So these are designs that may come out later as we go through all this stuff. Um, and I think after this week, what we'll maybe try and do is we'll throw this in our rotation. So, however that works, between Star Wars, GI Joe, Star Trek, and then adding BattleTech in here. So we may only get one video a week or maybe two, depending on how things work out um, in the future. So I'm just forewarning you because it's fun doing this. These are the things I've put into my life for so many years. A little here and a little there, maybe, but it's one of those. These are the fun and labor of love that I'd like to bring to you. So, um, and of course, with our LRMs, we're going to start off with a 2D, and we're going to add 1D for every additional. So our LRM 20s have that potential if you're shooting all 20 rounds, which I don't see why you wouldn't, because we are going to have the reloads, because we do have, as I'm looking at this here, um, because we have ammo. All right, so we have 12 extra reloads um, per launcher, so you could shoot 12 rounds at full capacity. So at that point, yeah, okay, it's only 12 rounds per LRM 20, but that's a lot of hurt to bring down on someone. You're talking about 22 I think 22 dice worth of damage onto something, however that works out. Plus, keep in mind, with the D6 system, you still have that wild die that could actually increase whatever the damage is. I know you're going to get some ones in there, but you have potentials of sixes and everything else, and it gets very scary very quick. So, um, with that, I think we're going to end it here. I think we have everything kind of covered. Thank you so very much for stopping by. Thanks for joining me. It's always wonderful having you here. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and we will see you in the next video.